celebrating the power of possibility.
I'm Dr. Jerry Askew, and I believe anything is possible.
This is Anything is Possible. I'm Halloran Hilton Hill. I have the luxury of helping people see possibility through stories. And we tell the stories of great people whose lives really shine a spotlight on possibility. Along that journey, I've met some incredible people. I've talked to people all over the world, really, and also have talked to a few of my friends. And today, I have the great privilege of having one of my dear friends, Dr. Jerry Askew, in the building. And my opening salvo to you today is, man, I love you, Jerry.
Well, I love you too, Alan.
You're one of my favorite people on this planet. Thank you for being here today.
It's a privilege to be here.
With a collar on.
With the collar on.
Wow.
It's a big part of my story.
Wow. Because you had an incredible journey. When you made the pivot to answer this calling, it was a big pivot. Where's your story start?
Oh, my story starts at childhood. I was like so many people. I mean, I had a complicated childhood, a lot of challenges. One of the things that that happened as a child was a pretty serious church wound. And while
talk about it?
Well, yeah. I grew up with a dad who stopped school in fourth grade. He was an alcoholic, and that had its own challenges. Our home was a violent home, even though my dad had wonderful things about him as well. But when he hit the bottle, it was really bad. And then when I was 7, my 5-year-old brother and I were playing out on a country road in eastern North Carolina with a bunch of our friends, and it was a long time before I could admit this to myself, but I threw his shoe across the road, just being a big brother, aggravating his little brother. And when he went to get his shoe, a trucker came by and he saw all of us on the right side of the highway and moved over to the left to avoid putting us in danger, and didn't see my little brother was on the other side, and hit him and killed him. And so when that happened, my dad went deep into the bottle. My mother was a great woman of faith, and so she had the Bible, and she had her Lord to lean on. My dad didn't, and so he climbed deeper into the liquor bottle and got more and more violent. Again, I'm sure he continued to do the wonderful things he was doing in our community, but I didn't see any of that. And later on, my mother and our pastor, she went to our pastor for comfort, and he took advantage of that. And so when my dad found out, he left her. He actually kicked her out. And she took my younger siblings with her and left me with him. And so I got a chance to see him up close and personal even more. And then during that time, he got worse. A Little League official in town knew I was in a vulnerable place and invited me to his home one day, and started sexual abuse, which continued for months. And then when my mom and dad actually got back together, but it was tumultuous. And as I continued to grow older, my relationship with Dad got worse and worse until when I was 16, he kicked me out. And so he eventually invited me back home, but the damage was pretty much done. So all of that stems from a violation of trust by a pastor. And so
you were done with church.
I never was done with it, but Fellowship of Christian Athletes became my church. I was active in sports in high school and college.
What'd you play?
Well, I played football, basketball, baseball, and track in high school, but that'd be a lot more impressive if you didn't know that everybody had to be on our teams, because we were so small. If we didn't have any four-letter men, we wouldn't have teams. But and then in college, I was on the freshman football team, and then got redshirted, and then threw javelin on the track team. But I was in FCA, and
Where'd you go to school?
University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for undergraduate. And then I was in charge of marketing for the FCA. We were averaging about 20 guys at every one of our FCA meetings in Chapel Hill, and then I made an executive decision. I decided in 1973 that cheerleaders were athletes. I started inviting the cheerleaders to the meetings. All of a sudden, we were averaging 200 people a meeting. But I still struggled with church, and I had a period where I didn't go to church, and then, but then the bugs started calling again, and my dear wife, who is just a rock for me, she's an incredible woman. For our 20th anniversary, she sent me to a monastery for a week as her 20th anniversary gift to me. Many argue it was a gift to herself. Didn't get rid of me for a week, but she basically said, look, you and God, I had expressed this feeling that I thought I was being called to be a priest in the Episcopal Church. And she said, look, I don't care whether you're a priest or not, but you and God need to figure it out, because we're tired of hearing about it.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel.
On the second night I was in the monastery, I looked down in my journal. I was praying and journaling, and in my journal, these words were written. And I say these words were written. I don't recall writing them. It said, I don't want you to be a priest. You think if you're a priest, your mother will love you. And it took me all the way back to that time after my brother got killed, when my mother was kicked out and she didn't take me with her. And so in my little 8-year-old mind, there was this kind of false syllogism, my mama left because of a preacher. If I become a preacher, maybe she'll want me back. And thank God, I went home and told my kids and my wife, I said, I'm not going to be a priest. You could not get any more direct guidance from above than I got, and I'm not being called to be a priest. And but I was called for 2 or 3 other things. And one of them was, he said, you're taking care of everybody else's kids in Knoxville besides your own. Your first ministry is to be a better dad. Second call, you are married to a woman who knows you better than anybody in the world and loves you anyway. And she knew you needed to be here, and she sent you here. You need to become the man. These were the words written in my journal. You need to become the man your wife thinks you already are. Third, you're a healer. You've always been a healer. It's not coincidental you work at St. Mary's Health System, which is where I was working at the time. It's not coincidental you're in the healing ministry at St. John's Cathedral. I placed you there. You need to stop running from being a healer and be a healer. And then fourth and finally, the message was there are men all over the world trying to figure out who I want them to be. Walk with them. So I tried to build my life around those 4 calls, but then the itch came back. But I knew it wasn't to be a priest, And in the Episcopal Church, there are three ordained orders: bishops, priests, and deacons. Bishops are over a geographic area and shepherd that area. Priests are pastors in an individual church, and deacons are pastors out in the world. Our call is to be the prophetic voice of the poor to the church. And as soon as I read that sentence, I said, that's it. That's what I'm called to be. But when I was going through my discernment, it's about a 2-year process, people kept saying, you're already doing all these deacon jobs out in the world. Why do you need to wear a collar? And for about 3 months, I couldn't articulate why I needed to wear a collar. And they kept asking, you're already doing all your diaconal ministries. Why do you need to wear a collar? If you can't answer that, then we're not moving you forward. And I was praying about it, and the answer came. There are people all over the world who've been hurt by the church. Jesus called you to be a healer. Maybe when you're out there doing all those things with a collar on, it might not be so much, isn't Jerry Askew a good guy for doing all these good things? Maybe it's the church is good, and maybe they'll give the church another chance. And that's why I wear a collar. That's why I wore my collar today.
So much. First of all, thank you for your transparency. As a possibility, how did you get to the place where you could just speak your truth without fear? If you were to tell me, match the person to the backstory, I would never put this over the backstory that you just told us, right? You sit here today and you were just, I said, do you talk about your story? And I didn't see a parking brake or any brakes on that vehicle. How did you get to that? And why is it important? Because you just showed up so authentically, almost fearlessly.
Well, that was hard won. But
you were radically committed to your faith and service. And the level of just authenticity as you show up today, you said that was hard won.
Yeah. I'll tell you another story that will tell you how it happened, though. I was an Eagle Scout. My youth consisted of creating all kinds of reasons for people not to know what was going on at home. So being the captain of the football and basketball and baseball teams, being the student body president, being the Eagle Scout, all of those things were all about hiding what was really going on at home. And so fast forward, a new member at St. John's Cathedral was not ordained at the time, but they found out I was an Eagle Scout. We had a scout troop there. So on the Sunday morning when when we were going to raise money for the scout troop, they asked me to make the pitch. So I said, sure, I'll do that. And I had all my little note cards ready, scouts graduate from high school at a higher rate, and all of the reasons why scouting was good and still is. And so I walked up, when the appointed time came, I walked up to the front of the church. And in most Episcopal churches, and certainly ours at the cathedral, there's a long aisle down the center. And I had a vision. I stood there and had a vision. And I thought I was having a stroke. I didn't know what was going on. But the vision was, I saw a bowling alley in front of me. And I just stood there for what must have seemed like hours to the people waiting for me to start talking. It certainly seemed that long for me, but then it came to me. I put my cards in the pocket and I said to them, how many of you have been bowling? And everybody raised their hand, and I said, how many of you have been kiddie bowling? And most of them raised their hand. I said, what's the difference between kiddie bowling and adult bowling? It's the bumpers. I said, we're all bowling balls. Our mamas pop us out down the lane of life, but none of us get popped straight down the lane. All of us, either we veer off to the left or we veer off to the right. And the only difference between the kids who make it to the pins and the ones who end up in the gutter are the bumpers. We need to be bumpers. In this instance, scouting is a bumper. And I have been the beneficiary of bumpers my whole life. Coaches, scoutmasters, friends, parents, Sunday school teachers, people who saw me and heard me, and throughout all the difficult times. So I don't know how I would possibly have a choice but to try to see and to hear others who may or may not have been through what I've been
through. So do you think in this new chapter of your life, because I would imagine that you've redefined success.
Well, I'm a lot less concerned about what other people consider success. I mean, I spent a life building a resume, and I read a column by David Brooks, you've no doubt mentioned on this show. It said, you build your life on resume values or eulogy values. And I think I'm about to turn 70. I think I'm a lot more concerned about what somebody might say at my eulogy than I am building another resume.
Do you think all of what you've been through positions you to have, and this is a weird way to say this, but a better, more accessible grade of empathy?
I hope so.
And do you think that serves you well in your calling? Are you able to embrace people and love people in and through their brokenness because of your own?
There's no question that has a big impact, but I don't want to romanticize what I do because it's not pretty. A lot of the groups that I work with, a lot of the people I work with, they're in tough places and they're not particularly likable. I was called we were all called to love our neighbors as ourselves, but some of the people I don't even like. And so I had to develop a definition for me and for my work that included a definition of love. And I came up with, to love somebody is to want the best for them. And so sometimes the best for somebody is not giving them $5 when they're homeless. Sometimes it is to take them over to Volunteer Ministry Center or to Carm. You're a parent, I'm a parent. Sometimes our kids aren't likable, but to want the best for them means that sometimes it's tough love that I have to give them. And the same is in the church. Church is filled with human beings.
Talk a little bit about how your relationship, your experience with your view of God has changed. Has it upgraded? Has it expanded? Has it?
Well, she's awesome. Yeah, my daughter, when she was about 10, we were on the way to church one Sunday morning, and she said, "You know what I don't like about church, Daddy?" And I said, "What's that, baby girl?" I said, "Everybody acts like God's a man." I said, "Well, God's not a man. God's not a woman. God is too big to be too big to be confined to the English language." I said, so my idea of God has become far more expansive. I grew up in a church environment, which we didn't really talk about, but I grew up in a church environment where God was somebody to be feared. And
what's God now for you?
God is love. And I asked one of our mutual friends one time, I said, "Why are you a Christian?" And he said, "I think there's great truth in all the world's great religious traditions. I just think in my life, Jesus is the best manifestation of that truth that I've found. And that's why I'm a Christian, and Jesus has exposed me to a loving God."
Why don't we end here today? Why don't we end with you just praying a prayer of blessing over everybody that's watching, especially people who are trying to get to the other side of a church wound or a hard spot, and who want to know about the possibility of another chapter?
Sure. In our tradition, we start with the Lord be with you, and your response is, and with you also.
And with you also.
The Lord be with you.
And with you also.
Good and gracious Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for Halloran and his ministry. He may not define it that way, but all of us who know him know that it is. We ask your blessing on all those in life who may not have been able to experience God as a God of love and acceptance. We ask you to be with them, make your loving, healing presence known to them so that they can see themselves the way that you see them. See them as people with endless possibilities. We know that your dreams for us are greater than any we might have for ourselves, but sometimes in this world it's awfully hard to see that. So be with them, open their eyes, and open the hearts of all those surrounding them, because we know that where 2 or 3 are gathered, you have promised to be there. And sometimes those 2 are just you and the person who's in the midst of that dark night. So be with those people. Help them be able to see you and feel you and experience you as love and as acceptance and as loving them because you made them fabulous, just the way they are. We ask it all in your Son's name.